Danger Dolan, strats for all T15 heroic encounters. Refer to the links below this video for the normal or LFR guides. Here is how the fight works. Phase 1 goes from 100% to 40% and it's easily the hardest part of the encounter. When you pull the boss, you'll notice these two different balls approaching him are called a V2 orb and an anima orb. Depending on which orb you kill, the boss will enter either a Vita or an anima phase, and every 30 seconds or so the phase will reset, so you'll need to burn another orb. For this strategy you'll only ever be killing the anima orb, since you'll always want to be in the Vita phase. However, one of Raden's abilities will debuff your raid and force you to enter the red phase from time to time. On the 4th and 7th wave of orbs, instead of killing the anima orb, you'll have your main tank drag the boss ever so slightly towards the anima orb so he absorbs it. Shortly after, the Vita orb will hit him and he'll re-enter the Vita phase, with the debuffs reset. By the time you enter phase 2, there should have been 9 orb phases, though if you push to 10 then just kill the orb and pray DPS can get the boss to 40% before the 13th wave of orbs appear. As for the Vita phase mechanics, when you kill the first anima orb, your raid will get hit by an explosion for 600k damage. Use raid cooldowns for these explosions. Straight after it happens, a random DPS or healer will get something called an unstable Vita debuff. For this, your ranged DPS and healers should be split into 2 separate color groups with one DPS as your backup player, which I'll explain in a second. The person who got that unstable Vita debuff needs to move to a predetermined marker on the ground that corresponds to their group's color. At the same time, someone from the opposite color group moves to the other marker on the other side of the room that corresponds to their color. Both players will have 4 seconds to get in position, and if they fail to do so, your rotation will be fucked and everyone's dead. If you are successful, the unstable Vita debuff will jump from the original player to the new player, who is the furthest away player from them, at which point the original player can run back to the center of the room and the next player in their color group takes over their position on the marker. Bear in mind that the original player and all future players will still have the debuff, and it will only go away when the boss absorbs an anima orb. The backup player that I mentioned earlier will take over the original player's place in the color group queue until the debuffs are cleared. There's also an ad that spawns in this phase, and while it's recommended to have an off tank for this, you can also bring a plate DPS with decent gear to tank it. Be sure to hold it at least 30 yards from the group or he will bugger up your raid. It also explodes with an AoE damage upon death and a 10-yard diameter, but once again it shouldn't matter if it's held 30 yards from your raid. Your main tank needs to use a defensive ability for something called a Fatal Strike. The following abilities will keep you alive during it, so listen up. Shield Block for warriors, Shield of the Righteous for paladins, Shuffle for monks, Blood Shield for DKs, and Savage Defense for druids. You must use one of these abilities for Fatal Strike or your character will instantly die. Phase 2 is basically a tank and spank race against the clock from 40% to 5% health, and the boss will be channeling AoE damage that increases in damage based on how many buffs of damage he's got from absorbing orbs. You'll have corrupted anima and corrupted Vita orbs circling around the room, slowly making their way towards the boss. Just like before, he'll only ever be killing the anima orbs, and this time if they reach him, they will heal him a little bit, although when the boss reaches 20% HP, you'll be better off just burning him and ignoring the orbs. Take note that when you kill an orb in this phase, it will wipe your raid unless someone is standing directly under it when it dies. It does 2.5 million damage spread across everyone underneath it at the time of death, so your best bet is to have shadow priests, monks, and mages solo soaking the explosions with damage nullification like Ice Block. Alternatively, you can have your whole raid stand under the explosion, but this wastes time for your melee when they should be burning the boss. If you have managed to save Bloodlust or Heroism from the first phase, you're better off using it here since the healing will be intensive. For the last 5 to 10%, the boss will be putting out absurd AoE damage, and you will only survive if your healers can manage raid cooldowns for that precise moment. Since you're avoiding the anima phase completely, You'll only need to bring 5 healers to this, although I do recommend 6 if you are having trouble. DPS, make sure you kill those anima orbs both in this phase and the first phase within 10 seconds. You won't need to kill it for the 4th or 7th wave, but the more anima orbs that reach him, the more buggered your raid will be. Let's recap. The pre-phase, you kill the anima orb except on the 4th and 7th wave. Phase 1, you organize a color group rotation for the unstable V2. You drag the ad 30 yards from your raid with your off tank or plate DPS. The main tank has to use shield block, shield of the righteous, shuffle blood shield or savage defense for the fatal strikes. Phase 2, from 40 to 20% you gotta kill the corrupted anima when they're approaching the boss, and for 20 to 5% you just gotta tunnel into the boss and win. And do keep in mind that for 40 to 20% when you do kill a corrupted anima, someone has to absorb the damage, otherwise everyone dies. Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and clime, hearken to my joyful tidings of the golden future time. Soon or late the day is coming, tyrant man shall be overthrown, and the fruitful fields of England shall be trod by beasts alone.